To the people of Haiti, we say clearly and with conviction, you will not be forsaken, you will not be forgotten. In this, your hour of greatest need, America stands with you, the world stands with you.
That was President Obama for the second day in a row, clearing the decks and focusing his government on the response to Haiti. His wife, First Lady Michelle Obama, says today it's going to be a years-long effort.
Indeed, both Obamas putting them at the forefront of the federal response to this tragedy. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABCNews.com's Top Line. I'm David Chalian.
And I'm Rick Klein.
Each weekday we're bringing you the very latest political headlines, reporting, insight, analysis, everything you need and want to know about politics.
And it's twitter.com/thenote to follow along our thoughts 24 hours a day.
That's a very exciting prospect.
Or at least 22 or so.
Get us started. What's your top line?
The teammates, 42 and 43. That's the former presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush teaming up for the first time. We're seeing George W. Bush step into the spotlight in the post-presidential time. They are working together to coordinate some of the federal responses and on behalf of the United Nations and the U.S. government to the tragedy down in Haiti. We saw the George H.W. Bush partnership emerge with Bill Clinton. This is the first time that we're seeing 42 and 43 work on something together. I think there's a potential for them to kind of maybe move to the next stage, that relationship we saw in the past, and clearly a priority for the Obama White House.
And purely through a political lens, potentially beneficial for the Obama White House in terms of being able to have a real bipartisan moment here, something that has been very absent for this administration throughout the last year. Payback. That's President Obama's other agenda item today. He is telling the banks it is time for Wall Street to start paying back the taxpayer money lent to them through the TARP program. Many of these banks, Rick, as you know, have already paid back their money. He says that's not sufficient. All banks are responsible. These biggest banks are responsible until every penny of the taxpayer money from TARP is paid back. This is talking about, I think it's about 141 billion, 117 billion perhaps over a 10-year period. But it's going to be a levy on these banks.
But it's actually called the Financial Crisis Responsibility Fee, which is a lot of words to avoid saying one three-letter word that Democrats especially don't like to say.
How unlike Washington to do something like that.
Indeed. End stages. We've reported before that healthcare negotiations are nearing the end, but this time it looks like it's actually happening. The signals this time are that Democrats are back at the White House this afternoon to try to finalize the negotiations. It was marathon sessions yesterday. Labor leaders are going in and out. And it just may be, David, that the last thing they needed was C-SPAN cameras or even any media attention whatsoever on this. There's so much else going on that it seems like negotiations have actually progressed at a pace that we haven't seen in some time.
You mentioned those marathon meetings, Obama going in and out of them again this afternoon. He will go in and out of these meetings. And we know from Charlie Rangel and George Miller, these chairmen up on the Hill, they want they want this bill, this merged bill between the House and the Senate to get to CBO for scoring no later than Saturday. Give CBO a week. Again, this is all pegged to getting this done before the State of the Union address. Win one for Teddy. That's the message Vicki Kennedy is sending in a fundraising appeal, a successful fundraising appeal for Martha Coakley, the Democratic candidate to replace her late husband in the United States Senate. This is part of that entire Democratic effort right now to pull out all the stops to save the 60th seat in the United States Senate after getting lots of alarm bells from the energy they were seeing for the Scott Brown, the Republican candidate up there.
Well, and if Republicans wanted the national race, they've got one. The problem is you don't get any more voters into your state as a result of nationalizing it. We'll see if Scott Brown can weather now the big firestorm that sparked among Democrats.
And of course what it means now that it's being overwhelmed by other news and sort of off the national stage, but not here at Top Line, which is why we are joined by John Berman, our correspondent up in New York, our political correspondent extraordinaire who was just up in Massachusetts this week trailing around with these candidates. John, first, just give us a sense, when you were up on the ground there, did it feel like, you covered those special elections last year too, did it feel like the national political world had descended upon Massachusetts?
No. I mean, there were only two. Each of them had only one event yesterday. One event, poorly attended events, and they were scheduled at the same time, which really stunk for me because I had to drive 45 minutes to get from one to the other so I could see both of them. But it's not about me, it's about them. These were very small events. There wasn't a lot of energy there. This is a TV campaign. This is a campaign that's being run in the media locally and to a large extent nationally. Now, I did go to both campaign offices, which was interesting. The Scott Brown campaign office, the Republican, there were people lined up at the door to get in, and it was very, very full. It was a much smaller office. The Martha Coakley office, the Democrat, was a huge office, and it was packed. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen as big of an office full with as many people, and they were all on the phone too. So I really think that both sides are very energized right now. This was a race that was kind of slow in starting, but now everyone is really keyed in.
You get the sense that sort of the beast stirring of the Democratic machine whirring back to life after taking this for granted for some time?
Absolutely. The Victoria Reggie, the Vicki Kennedy email that you mentioned up there a few minutes ago, they've raised $600,000 now, and it hasn't even been out there for 24 hours. Now, that's less than Scott Brown was able to raise in one day earlier this week. Brown was able to raise over $1 million one day this week. But the Democrats do think that this does show that there is finally, for them, some energy out there. They're also pointing to Coakley was able to go up with a negative ad this week, the first negative ad she put up of the campaign, really attacking Scott Brown as a Republican, tying him to Bush and Cheney. And the Democrats think that ad is effective because Brown's been really characterizing and establishing his own credentials this whole time, defining himself. Coakley hasn't done any defining of Scott Brown. This is the first time she's really making him seem like a Republican.
To do so at the time when voters are actually going to start paying attention is probably a wise strategy there. But I guess I want to pierce through just a little bit, John. Did Democrats drum up the closeness of this race in order to wake up their base, or did they really believe this seat may be at risk of falling into Republican hands?
I think it's both a little bit, David. Now, I don't know that they drummed up that it was close first. I think it was the Republican establishment or the right or conservative media that was able to really establish that this race was closing in. They pointed to some polls that, by the way, ABC doesn't consider airworthy, that the race was tightening. But clearly the Democrats in their own internal numbers were seeing that it was tightening also, else Martha Coakley would not be up with a negative ad. The Democrats do think that this new focus is energizing its base, but you know, they're walking a fine line here. Martha Coakley clearly wants the base to be energized, which in some case means being scared, but she doesn't want to make it seem like she's panicked. So I met with her yesterday in Dorchester, Massachusetts, interviewed her at a senior event, and I did ask her about the closeness of the race, and her answer was very interesting. I think we have the tape here.
Yeah, let's take a look.
We don't know it's close. I just disagree that the polls are accurate. We've got polls all over the map here, and one of the reasons is it's a short race. People are sort of not making up their mind or changing their minds. That's why a race like this has to focus on the issues and on who's running.
So you could see there, I mean, she doesn't want to admit that it's neck and neck, which is interesting.
Well, it is. And just to dispute the accuracy of the polls, clearly their internal polls are showing that this is a tightening race at the same time.
Martha Coakley and our political director, Gary Langer, in agreement.
They can agree. They can agree on that front. What's Scott Brown saying about this? I think it's been telling that as much as the national Dems are making no bones about the fact that it's a very close race, the national Republicans are keeping this at a little bit of a distance. They're obviously happy with what they're saying, but we're not seeing big expenditures from the RNC, from the NRSC. Is Scott Brown trying to leave a kind of a different impression about the help he's getting, right?
Well, Scott Brown wants to separate himself from national Republicans as much as humanly possible. He also wants to separate himself from the Tea Party folks as much as humanly possible. I asked him about the Tea Party people yesterday. He really said, well, he hasn't seen much of their support here. In an interview, he was asked later on about the Tea Party folks, and he said he wasn't even sure what they stood for. Now, the Coakley campaign put out a video today showing that Scott Brown actually spoke at a Tea Party rally last April, which is interesting. But Scott Brown likes to say he's not a conservative Republican or a liberal Republican. He says he's a Scott Brown Republican, and he's bristling at these new negative ads that Martha Coakley has up, tying him to George Bush and Dick Cheney. And I did ask him about this yesterday, and we have some video, I believe, of his answer to that question.
Let me make this really clear. The Herald 2 weeks ago said that the GOP is abandoning me. And now Martha Coakley and the political machine would have you believe that Karl Rove, George Bush, and everyone else is coming down running my campaign. We have dinner every night.
Yeah. So he wants to seem independent from the national Republicans. Now it's not like his boyhood friends are really running his campaign. He has people who are actually very involved with Mitt Romney's presidential campaign who are from Massachusetts but are very seasoned political professionals helping him behind the scenes.
Hey, John, quickly before we go, no sense, though, that the Democrats are using their biggest sort of quiver in terms of getting President Obama up there to campaign for her, right?
Both the campaign and the White House at this point insist there are no plans to have President Obama come up this weekend. That's different than saying no, he's definitely not coming up, but there are no plans right now. Tomorrow, they're getting a pretty big gun, we think still. Bill Clinton is scheduled to be at 2 different rallies, one in Worcester, Massachusetts, one in Boston for Martha Coakley. Those are still on the schedule, even though, interestingly enough, Bill Clinton is, of course, a special envoy to Haiti and very busy with the Haitian relief efforts.
John Berman, our correspondent who was on the ground there in Massachusetts yesterday. Thank you, sir, for being here. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming back. It's been a while, John.
I know. You can't keep me away.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.